Welcome, everyone, to tonight's Wednesday Night Live show. Our guest tonight is Michelle Minton. Michelle has a Bachelor's of Arts at Johns Hopkins University and a Master's of Science of the University of New England. Michelle is currently the Senior Policy Analyst at Reason Foundation with a focus on consumer policy issues, including gambling, alcohol, tobacco, nicotine, drug legalization, and health. Woo! Michelle has been published and cited by nationally respected news outlets such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the USA Today. And on behalf of everybody here on the Wednesday Night Live team, we want to say thank you for joining us tonight. I know you're very, very busy, so we're happy to see you here tonight.
Well, thanks for inviting me, gentlemen.
I saw you hold up what you're holding up, and I got a great question for you. Because when I was doing my research on you, something one of your articles caught my eye, so I was like, "Oh, I gotta ask her this question." let me add the Aussie. The Aussie's coming in. There he is, Mr. Paul. Almost called you Phil. But before we get into saying hello to our guest, let's say hello to this my team here. And Phillip. Phillip is in the middle tonight. Phillip, how's your week going, buddy?
My week has been spectacular, truly. We went to and from Columbia. Deirdre, my partner of 12 years, we went to and from Columbia, South Carolina, drove it, saved the plane fare that would have been paid for, and just drove it. Got mani-pedis after she did her teach. She's a nurse practitioner who works for a company that does teaches on how to administer IV medications, or excuse me. Anyway, they're kidney medications that are given by a syringe. Anyway, it's a very interesting job, and a lot of people need her help. There aren't many of hers. So anyway, Columbia, South Carolina is a horrible place. It's a horrible place, but they do have a great nail salon, a very nice one.
What was so good
about it? After you get out of the nail salon in Columbia, South Carolina, you have the option of car dealerships, the Kroger, and I do mean Disco Kroger in Atlanta has nothing on this place, and that's it. Or there's a very large army base there that I think is maybe more or less abandoned. So yeah, let's just say you're SOL if you'd like to go find someplace, you're not going to get much that has been Michelin rated there. But the road to and from is really, I don't think it's actually been resurfaced in decades. And
no nightlife.
Well, if you consider the fact that their Kroger has a Target-like, sort of rip-off clothing section, and you need some new socks, yeah, I suppose that's a nightlife that can be had. But I have to. It was a tremendous pedicure. My feet actually, well, they don't look great, but they feel better. And then on Sunday, Michael had his white coat ceremony, which is their official entrance into medical school at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and I'm so absurdly proud. And I'd like to think I might have had a little bit to do with his direction, but probably not.
Nice.
No, it was wonderful. Go ahead.
Good. Mr. Nick Orlando, living in sunny Florida, which has been extremely hot. How's your week going?
Not as exciting as Phil's, but
I'm going to give up with this whole please call me Phillip thing, because nobody seems to be taking.
Okay, Phillip. Not as exciting as Phillip's week, but
thank you, Nicholas.
You're opening up a new shop. That's exciting news.
Yes, we are relocating one of our stores. Been open for 10 years, about 1,000 yards away, but it's a new, fresh look with a bigger facility, and we're able to handle and supply the rest of the stores. But yeah, So for the last 2 months, that's what I've been doing, because I kind of like to do the work myself and then complain about it later. But yeah, after it all looks nice, I just say, yeah.
If it looks like anything like the other stores, is going to be awesome, buddy.
But that's what I've been up to. And doing the Florida smoke-free thing, of course. We're getting ready to gear up for committee week and sessions in January this year, so that's going to be fun. But scheduling a reception prior to and during committee week, and just kind of keeping all the balls in the air. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's about it.
That's it. And Mr. Australia.
Yeah, g'day. How are you?
Good night.
Good to see you, Paul.
Hey guys, how's everyone?
Good.
I've been running around trying to put a roof over my head, and yeah, what a headache. And color coordinated beards and sweaters. Okay, sure. If you can count all the grey hair that's starting to come through now. But no, other than that, I've been doing very little over here. Just banging my head against the brick wall with the Australian government and trying to get my head around their more stupidity, because now they're asking for jail terms if you're caught with nicotine products. I really don't understand anymore. And
we need to do we need to dedicate a whole 2 hours and sometime this next couple shows just on Australia.
Well,
we could do a 4-hour.
Well, I was joking with Addie Tooney the other day about putting a GoFundMe together to get me back to the US, and I'm actually seriously considering it now. I'd rather come and fight over there, 100%, because I'm pushing shit uphill here, and that's the only way to put it.
Yeah.
And there was a little thing that you were saying before. How many times do we say a certain word in the one day? Well, I've been going fuck for the last 2 weeks.
You met your quota for the F word tonight on the show.
And it's not getting any better.
No, it's not. It's not.
This is something I think most people understood a long time ago, and we continue to think they're going to change, but they're not. So yes, set that up. Let's get you back here.
So yeah, I got a room to rent if you're ready to come to the States. Michelle, how's your week going?
Yeah, I mean, pretty good. This summer, now that I mentioned earlier before the show started, all of the flavor bans in the States. Now that that's calmed down, it's sort of hot indictment summer. In terms of outside of my actual work, this summer's been insane. Just everything that's been happening in the world. Interesting to watch, though. But for me personally, it's kind of looking ahead to a lot of things that are coming up with COP10. The Conference of the Parties coming up pretty soon. We know flavor bans are coming back in the next session. And then I've got all the other work that I do on the other, the other vice industry types of issues we talked about, substitute sugars and sports gambling. Perennially, people have a panic over gambling. I don't know why we still have this conversation. Why it's the moral outrage just seems to bubble up every couple of years. I see stories in like the Atlantic where they're like, sports gambling is the end of the world. Really what it comes down to is an aesthetic preference. People don't like the commercials.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're right.
That's what we've been working on.
I usually don't talk about how my week's going, but I did something today and I'm proud of myself. Well, it was an accident. Let's be honest. It was an accident. I left the house without my cell phone, and I didn't realize till like halfway through the day how quiet it was. I was like, I went the whole day. No, it was that. But as a parent, like I'm driving home, all my kids are gone, but I have grandkids now with cell phones. So all the way home, all I kept thinking is, who needs me? And like, what did I miss? Who needs who called me? Whose car broke down? You look, Nick's shaking his head. Yeah, that's all I kept thinking. I didn't care about what happened on Twitter. Didn't care what happened on Facebook or any of the other social media sites that I'm hitched to. It was just like, and it dawned on me, God, I could do this. I could, if I didn't have to worry about the kids' part, I could do a whole day, 2 weeks without ever having my cell phone with me and just waiting until I sat in front of a computer to see what was actually going on throughout the day. Oh, that was good. Phillip, since Timmy's not here, do you know how to do this or should I do it? Do you know how to say hello to everybody? in the chat?
I do not. I've
Okay,
never actually got. I multitask as much as I possibly can. And I love everyone who watches, but I simply can't get into the comments.
I will do it. I'll do it from the top.
You have the voice.
Yeah. Steve, hello. Pam, Mallory's out there. Tom is out there as well. Jamie's out there. Let's see who else. I don't usually do this, guys, so relax. Pam Spraggins, Jamie, Michael Redford. Who else am I missing? This dude named Nick Orlando's out there. Jamie, I said Jamie. I think I got everybody. Thank you, everybody out there in chat, for joining us. We're very lucky to have Michelle be part of the show with us tonight. And if you have any questions for Michelle, again, just put the Q on there, and then put your question, and I will star it and save it. So when we get to that part of the show where we have your guys' questions answered by Michelle, we will be able to find them very, very easily. I am going to start you off with we usually start off with fun questions, but I noticed you've done live shows. I went and did a little bit of research. You've been on live shows, so I'm sure you're super, and just seeing you now, you're super comfortable and relaxed. But we still have our fun, relaxing questions. So this one may upset 50% of the people out there and 50% of the people on the show, but you got to answer this one, Michelle. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
No, just because of the moisture fact. Too much water. I mean, I like that flavor combo, I think, but it's just too much liquid on top of cheese. It's gross.
Yes.
Thank you. This is the correct answer.
Phillip, we got to know. We got to know.
We do have to know these things.
It has been a while since we've gotten to know, so it's good. It's good. Thank you for being on our
Thank you very much.
I've never honestly even thought about that question because I've never been confronted with the opportunity to eat pineapple on pizza.
Like I was saying, we have a few guests that have never ever done a live show, and they're very nervous. And I like to start them off with some fun questions, loosen them up a little bit. But like I said, I've seen quite a few interviews with you, so I know you know what you're doing, and you're very comfortable being in front of the camera and answering questions. So let me hit you with your serious question. You know what? One more. Let's do one more before we go serious. Your first job, and did you quit or get fired?
Oh, first job, like first money exchange.
First job. You got that work permit.
Babysitting. I babysat an infant, actually. So it was the first time I was changing diapers and everything. I think I did okay. I mean, that wasn't like a come back forever job, so I didn't have to quit. My first real adult job was working at a Hollister in Pennsylvania. I was fresh out of college with about $100,000 in student debt, and so I was like, I need money because I was going to grad school at that point. So and I was looking through the newspaper at that time and Craigslist and everything. And the thing that was paid the most, the fastest, was this manager training program at Hollister. I had no intention of working there. Yeah. So I worked there for about 4 months. I think it was god awful. Like there were fun moments. I'm working with some of the kids because I was managing the floor kids, and it's like some of it was fun, but mostly it was god awful. And I got to quit, and I got to quit not epically, but in a way where it was like they were asking me to do something, and I got to say "F you," I quit.
Yeah, we got it.
Oh wait, but I can't believe that you actually worked at the Hollister at the start. I knew Adam, the person who was the head of the Hollister brand, because right out of college, I was just unable to say no to the Abercrombie and Fitch assistant manager position I was offered out of nowhere. Worked for them for a while. It was great. It was before they became an absurd, I guess you could say, as soon as I got all the way to district manager, and then Mike Jeffries came into my store. He said, "We don't think your soccer manager is brand positive." I said, "Go fuck yourself." And that was around the time that I think Hollister stores were opening up, and it was the paratroopers and all that crazy stuff. And it when I got there, they paid a really great starting salary.
They paid great. I was in the back of the warehouse kind of doing shipping stuff, and so we got to not listen to the music that the poor people on the floor had to listen to all day long. And we had our instructions by a printer every hour. It was so weird, or not even hour. It had every 10 minutes what you should be doing in your specific role. Very often.
having kids that have grown up in the 90s and the 2000s, I spent a lot of money in those two stores you guys just mentioned. Hey, I'll give you this. It's the best two smelling stores I've ever walked into.
Yeah, they do smell. It's because we spray perfume every 20 minutes.
That's right.
Yeah, we 18 layers on, like, on the forms, as we called them. Okay. And then we spray them down with either the clean or the woods. I like the woods. As soon as people said the woods is like for old men, I'm like, all right, it's time for me to shag ass.
My personal favorite working at Hollister were the loss prevention guys, because those were as far as I could tell, the only people over 30 in the entire company were loss prevention. And they would come in like being, real hard, but wearing Hollister stuff. Like flip flops, usually it's kind of hard to see a guy being kind of scary when he's wearing it.
It's kind of hard to tackle somebody with skinny jeans on. All right.
We had the CFO coming with 18 layers. He didn't look quite comfortable.
When I was doing a little bit of the research on you, and one of the articles that I think it was an article that it was actually your bio, I think, and I got to the very end of it, and let me read it here to get it over with here. It says you enjoy spending your time playing poker, enjoying salty foods, and drinking delicious craft beer. So this is a two-part question for you. What is your favorite craft beer? And will we see you on ESPN's World Series of Poker anytime soon?
I'll answer the last question first. You will only see me on a World Series of Poker Tour event on television if I've done something very wrong and stumbled into a place I don't belong. Favorite craft beer? I get that question a lot. It's a hard one to narrow down. So I would say, up until now, my favorite go-to craft brewery has been Flying Dog here in Maryland. They just got, bought out, purchased. So we'll see how that goes from here on out. If the new ownership don't mess with success, but for most of my adult life, Flying Dog has just made some really standout beers, and I love that they really swing for the fences. A lot of times, their Old Bay beer, who knew that was going to be a hit when they introduced it one summer, and now it's just kind of in the regular rotation.
All right, and I am going to pass it off to Mr. Phillip over there. He's got a question for you. Phil, all yours.
Serious question. Okay. One of the reasons I was so excited to ask you on the show, I think probably when I became part of the show, I haven't been part of the show for that long, because you write some extraordinary pieces, and I think the most in-depth, comprehensive, and flat out amazing piece of writing you've done. It was a two-part piece on Bloomberg from Inside Sources, and then continued with, I think, just CEI. Anyhow, it was, I guess my question is, was that the research that you did in preparation to write those pieces, which are just astounding, what was that like, and did it take a toll?
Definitely took a toll. So a lot of the research that I had to do, I think one of the first pieces I wrote was that philanthrocapitalism piece in Inside Sources. And that's what caught somebody's attention, who then later sent me some documents, some internal documents from the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. But so that piece, I did a lot of research because I knew I was thinking about these ideas because, I like to keep up with what else is going on in the political world and the philosophical world. And I've been paying attention to the conversation about like decolonizing stuff. And so I'm like, well, this is like what is happening with very, very, very large philanthropists who roll into countries with very small GDPs can have an extraordinarily outsized influence, which seems like an issue here. So I had to do a lot of research, not just into what Bloomberg's philanthropy's activities were, but also into kind of dive into the principles and the philosophical underpinnings of decolonization work, to make sure, for one thing, that I wasn't just, colonizing their words and their phrases and stuff. I wanted to make sure I understood what their principles were and how they saw things, and to see if this is something that fit in, and it seemed to. So I continued writing about it. And then I had someone, I don't even know how they got these documents from the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. When they got to me, they were a little old already. I think it was their 2018 plan for low and middle income countries. But it was an extraordinary number of pages in there, lots and lots of, and when you're reading it in retrospect, like I'm reading it now and they're talking about 2018. I think I was reading that in 2019 or 2020. You can see all of this happening. And then you can also see you see the background stuff that you didn't know was happening. For example, giving a government money and hosting trainings for legal writers, the people who write the laws of that country. And you're like, well, why are you doing that? Why are you hosting those trainings? What are you hoping to get out of that? So you see like all of those little things. And then my next question, of course, and I didn't have any documents to answer these questions, is what do their plans look like for America, for Canada, for Australia, for the United Kingdom, for Ireland? Like what, because they have these plans. I would love to see those as well, just to see, because I think we're already seeing some plan in action in the UK, obviously in Australia. In the UK, I've been seeing a lot more scare stories about youth vaping, which if you've read if you've read any of my like bigger, longer form works, one of the things I've said repeatedly is that I think the public health and media together constantly talking about youth vaping is a big part of why we had such a spike in youth interest in vaping in America. And I think that's what, I don't know if they know that. It almost feels like they do know that, because then it'll be followed by a spike in youth vaping, and then they can then start banging the drum for new bans or laws or whatever, restrictions.
Yeah.
Did you come away, I'm sorry, follow up. Did you come away with the feeling that it was somehow coordinated? I do think that there are certain things that are just entirely too the timing feels like it couldn't possibly be coincidence. And I think that you bring up a good point, because we talked about this last week, I'm constantly trying to find new ways to not come off sounding like a conspiracy theorist. And it's very difficult on most days. But did you come away feeling like, their training programs, and especially their influence in lower middle income countries, did you feel like that was coordinated ahead of time, or simply just this is what happens if we get a dishy scoop on something and we can all hit it at once in terms of our headlines?
I don't feel like it's coordinated. I know it's coordinated. Like from at this point, from the documentation, and from there, it's not even a conspiracy, right? Like because a conspiracy requires secrecy. Because I guess at certain levels it is, but it's really upfront, and they're on its face. There isn't actually anything wrong with what they're doing in terms of as nonprofits go, as public interest civic groups go. What they're doing is forming coalitions. The weird thing here is that normally happens pretty organically, even if you have a couple of organizations that are kind of owned in common or sister organizations. Other people come to it kind of organically, and then you have your bias in the media always. In this case, you have an entire plan top down with a billionaire behind it, who is intentionally getting their fingers into every type of civic organization, university, media center that exists in a country, with the specific plan of producing the evidence, writing the policies, and telling the stories. So like it's not even a conspiracy. They have a very effective multi-tiered plan. Then one of the problems, besides just the scale of it, one of the problems I have with it is the fact that they are taking over civil society in these countries, which in what I mean by that is they're not usually setting up, from what I can tell anyway, they're not usually setting up AstroTurf organizations. They are actually identifying real partners on the ground, existing health advocacy types of groups. But then what they do functionally, from what I can tell again, is that they present this opportunity to all of the nonprofits that exist in countries, which are, let me tell you, always desperate for money. And they say, hey, here's Bloomberg Philanthropies out here willing to give money to people who are interested in this issue from this angle with these kind of activities. And of course, a lot of the groups this is assumption, I imagine there's a lot of groups out there who might never have touched this issue or might have even gone a more neutral way, but for this convincing to get on board with a big and we have this in the United States as well. The CDC coordinates with a lot of the public health, the state level public health groups, of course, but they also state level public health agencies, but they also coordinate with a lot of, the body parts orgs, or what does Lindsay Stroud call them? The public health trade associations, American Heart, American Lung, American Cancer Society, all of them.
Trade associations.
And they have lots of, places where they engage in this. I've done tons, or previously in my career, I used to do a number of FOIA requests because they take so long. So I was always kind of just trying to keep them rolling. And you can see this, the way they all communicate, the way they coordinate. I'm wondering, my favorite FOIA result ever was in one case where I was FOIA-ing the CDC, but also state health agencies, and I caught some kind of like email service where your voice messages would get sent into your email. So I caught that in one of these FOIA requests, and the voice message was from one health agency person in one state that I'd FOIA'd, leaving a message for another public health agency person in another state that I'd also FOIA'd, telling them that the CDC says not to put anything in emails about this because we're being FOIA'd. And I'm like, okay, great, awesome. Like, yeah, do it over telephone. And I was like, great. So that's just how it operates. And I put that out on Twitter and everything, and it was like, people in our group were like, what? But then it kind of disappeared because anybody who might make that into a story doesn't want to make that into a story. I'm not going to name names, but any kind of upper level journalist who might have even been interested in that. The deal here in the United States is if you narc on like the FDA or the CDC, you don't get the embargoed press releases. You don't get invited to the press releases where some big news story is happening. And those agencies know that.
You get red flagged.
I remember that very well. And it had to have been excruciating for you to do that work and to find that you were not getting you're not making headway because of, quite frankly, a standard of practice that goes against the very heart of the spirit of journalism. Really, it's
actually, it just reminded me when that person sent me those documents right off the bat. I tried to talk to a number of journalists to ask them if I could send it to them, because for one thing, I didn't have journalistic immunity. If somebody was because I also didn't know about the legality of these documents. We had internally our lawyers kind of work on everything and figure out what we could do legally. But it was like, I would like to protect this person, and I don't have journalistic immunity.
Right.
But no journalist was interested.
Yeah. Nick, you're up, buddy.
Thanks.
I don't have a whole lot.
I was hoping you could tie some Florida stuff with.
Well, I wasn't going to tie Florida stuff. I just wanted to ask about. I guess I could say, have you been involved in Florida much with from a state level?
No, not, I was going to say I've been involved with Florida in that my parents live there, but in terms of the vapor issue, no, I really haven't. And not directly. I know that's something Guy's been working. Guy Bentley, I'm an organization, and it's been keeping track of Florida. Maryland was the one I worked the most on over the last year, just because that's my home state.
I gotcha. But I did want to ask you, only because from personal experience, I noticed a difference in the state since the pandemic happened. How has that changed our messaging and how we're able to communicate and engage with your messaging? Has that changed a lot outside? Like, I see it in Florida. I don't know if it happens on, the federal level or anything like that. I was just kind of curious.
Do you mean, how does public health messaging change since the COVID-19?
Yeah. Have you made like big adjustments to it, or have you just been kind of all the same, since before and after? Is it just the same?
I'll be honest. Yeah. So, it's interesting when the pandemic, E-Valley happened, and we all hate that word, but that's what, until they officially change it, they've been asked by a number of scientists, but, E-Valley, THC vapes, the outbreak of lung injuries, when that happened, obviously it was like, oh, I already kind of distrusted the CDC and had like conspiracy brain theories about what was happening behind the scenes. But then that happened, and you're like, oh no, they're really either completely incompetent, which is terrifying, or they're intentionally misleading the public about in the midst of a public health crisis, telling them that it's e-cigarettes and not black market THC vapes that were, adulterated. Anyway, but even after that, when the pandemic hit, I realized in retrospect, I was like, everybody just needs to calm down and give the CDC 2 weeks or like 2 months. Like, it's a whole new virus. It's going to take time for them to coordinate, blah, blah, blah. And then, a year in, I'm like, what the hell is happening? Like, because, I've written about CDC and public health federally and internationally for years. And so, like, I was well aware and have been saying for years that their fixation on non-communicable diseases like obesity or car accidents or gun violence or all of that kind of stuff, while those things are important and they're important to study, I completely just blew past that. Like, all of those things are important to like keep track of and maybe take action on, but like the CDC's job is to protect the public from communicable diseases for them. Like, that's what they were founded to do. And the mission creep I was saying is weakening that part of their institution. And I later said that about the WHO. But that, after E-Valley happened too, during E-Valley, one of the things I was saying to CDC directly was that if you continue to do this obviously, like you are misleading the public so obviously for a political agenda, you're not going to have the public's trust when you need it. For example, if you need people to take some kind of vaccine. I said that before the pandemic happened, and then it happened. And even I was shocked at the level of, I would just say, I'm not even going to say incompetence. They just seem to drop the ball for decades on communicable diseases. But so in terms of me writing about public health, one of the weird things that I can't even say what the adjustment was, but writing about public health in our country and at the international level, I'm much more careful about the way I word things around it. For one, because I do want people to have a skepticism towards the current systems that we have that are clearly, there's evidence. We all just lived through it. There's clearly something wrong in Denmark here. But I also don't want people to simply just close off and ignore all health advice, because it is important for a country to be able to coordinate on some of these things. So I don't want people to necessarily just say, well, they said eggs were bad for you one year and now they're good for you, so I'm not even going to pay any more attention to science.
Yep. I've seen that with my parents' generation. They kind of flip-flopped on the egg thing, and then they just gave up. They were like, you know what? I don't care. Give me eggs, whites, yolks. I don't care. Give me eggs.
So
everything our parents said was good for us is bad for us. Milk, red meat, college.
Yeah.
Well, this guy right here got a promotion for keeping his mouth closed in the CDC. Let's be honest there, right?
Yeah, freedom.
I did have one more thing though for Michelle.
Go ahead, Nick.
If you've seen any messaging in regards to disposables containing fentanyl locally? We haven't seen it in Florida yet. I heard that it's in DC, and I wanted to know if in the Maryland area you're starting to see billboards or anything about it.
I haven't seen it, but I'm also one of those people who does not really, like, I'm a millennial and I just don't anymore pay very close attention to what's happening in the news. I kind of like hear the whispers of stories and then go find them somewhere. So, but I'm aware of this line, this idea. I am not even sure how realistic it is that would be. It seems to me that fentanyl would be much more expensive than liquid nicotine, so I don't understand why a dealer would sell it that way, losing a profit. It seems more like, if it ever has happened, an accident, or it was an intentional fentanyl fake.
Right. They're saying that there's trucks driving around DC with billboards on them, and I was just kind of curious if it's moved outside of DC right now.
What? Billboards that say what?
I've not seen that, but that wouldn't surprise me. We have a guy with a car that has a giant rat on it who drives around. So I don't even know if people would notice that billboard.
Well, that's a look, isn't it?
My Aussie buddy, you're up.
I'm actually going to stem from Philip's question. Here in Australia, we've seen Bloomberg now dig his heels in a very big way. We had a professor here at Melbourne University, Professor Lopez, who was sent to Australia from the United States under the guise of doing, how would we put it, LMIC, the numbers of the different people in the LMICs around the world and population control. Then we found out that he was the bagman for Bloomberg and that X amount of money came into Australia from his pockets, and then the Australian government actually went dollar for dollar with him. That money then, we found out, is now being put through all the universities here in Australia, and especially a foundation that we have here put together by Tui Forrester, known as the Minderoo Foundation. We also know that Gates is on that board. That's another one that we've got a lot of problems here in Australia with right now. But the rhetoric that's coming out of here, and we have a specific Dr. Sandro Domeno, or whatever you want to call him. We call him Dr. Stupid, or the TV doctor, for that matter. But he's now asking for an Australian version of the CDC to be created. And he's asking for funding to come from philanthropy. And on top of that, he's also asking for the Truth Initiative to be set up here in Australia and be given an office space.
No
Yeah,
waste of money. What? There's so much good
Barkeep.
done with that money, especially in Australia. Obviously, there's fires and environmental issues. There's Aboriginal, that's I mean, Australia's a hot mess. It's one of the greatest, in great meaning in the neutral term, just as in big, like the greatest human experiments, like ratcheting back into prohibition that I've seen in my lifetime. I think at least in an industrialized country like Australia. And it would be funny if it wasn't so sad. I guess it still is pretty funny that how many times can you ban something and it get worse before you try something different? They're literally on like ban escalation number 3 or 4 at this point, and it doesn't. Every time they do it, something crazier, like some new crazy, because that's how illicit operators do. You never underestimate drug smugglers and like illicit dealers. They're the most flexible, creative people on the planet, and they will find a way to get product where people want to pay for it.
exactly. But this is going on from that question. With what's happening here in the universities and the Australian vaping community or the stakeholders within the industry here, we're not even allowed to speak to anyone within government to get any straight answers. Okay. When we do a FOIA request here, it takes anywhere up to 2 years for that to be returned to us. And then we've had some to the TGA, Therapeutic Goods Administration. I've had 3 now denied that it falls under national security when it comes to tobacco harm reduction. I just looked at it and I said, excuse me, how is this national security? I'm asking about who put together your board for all these new vaping laws, and now the ban that's on the table is that they want to completely eliminate open systems. That's the next one.
Yeah.
On top of plain packaging, on top of nicotine restrictions to 20 milligrams, so be it. But 20 milligrams of freebase and 20 milligrams of salt nic, that's 2 completely different puppies. They don't understand that either because they don't read chemistry, by the way. They don't understand chemistry here in Australia. So we've got that issue as well. And then they're looking at jail terms, considering that Western Australia has the highest fines right now of $45,000 for vaping devices and up to $225,000 for a company that sells a vaping device that might contain nicotine. We've just had a crackdown, or they found a warehouse with 300,000 vapes in it. And out of that, they estimated the value at 10 million Australian street dollars, which I can't justify that when it's a $3 device and they're throwing a $10 million tag on it. It doesn't add up. Their math is also wrong, so they can't count either. Do you think that philanthropy coming from the United States and elsewhere in the world is really affecting our policy that much? And how the hell can we cut this off at the knees?
That's a really good question. Like the second part of that question is a tough one. I'll be honest. Yes, that the philanthropy is 100% influencing policy, I would say, at this point in most countries, just because, again, the size, even in a country like Australia, a really big industrialized country with a high GDP, it's just when you have money that's like percentages of the GDP being spent lobbying. And let's be clear that Bloomberg Philanthropies doesn't just focus on tobacco, right? They focus on other types of issues. He's really interested in gun control, which isn't an issue in Australia, but he's also interested in other things that those are the get your foot in the door things. So it's kind of like overlapping the amount of influence. It's for everyone. Like I said, I would love to see those documents for Australia, Canada, America, all of the non-LMIC countries. But how do you stop it, really? How do you stop a man with billions of dollars willing to give away hundreds of millions of dollars at a time for countries that truly could use that money, right?
Right.
The way the Philippines does it is they have their own specific laws about philanthropy. The United States is supposed to have those same laws, including how our American philanthropists behave in other countries, right? But we don't really enforce them. There are other things you can do in terms of like how much a person can give away, like without paying taxes. You can still give away your entire fortune if you want, but after a certain point, and that should be up to each country to decide, because it's really a matter of how much money goes from being helpful to coercive. Honestly, in medicine, in science, when you're doing an experiment with human subjects, and one of the things you have to think about is, well, you want to incentivize sometimes people to join a study, but you cannot make that incentive so high that it would be considered coercive, because that'd be unethical. Then then it wouldn't be informed consent. And I think you can kind of look at philanthropy in that way. Sometimes it's easier to see in smaller countries, smaller countries with less just money, capital flowing around, that at a certain level, it's not philanthropy. It's something else. When it becomes so big compared to the rest of the money that's flowing around in that country, it's coercive. That's why I use the word, philanthrocolonialism. I think the thing that needs to happen, honestly, to stop it, like the first step, and that's why I wrote those articles. And I think I think other people are talking about this. Yet that what needs to happen is the people in these countries need to know that's what's happening, because functionally what's happening is these philanthropic, mega firms are diluting the people's voice in that country. Their ability to shout at their lawmakers what they want and express their views and opinions are being drowned out by all the views and opinions that are coming from these think tanks and these university people with grant money from Bloomberg and the media people who've gone to the Bloomberg workshops and all of that. So, the people in the country need to shout at their lawmakers that this isn't okay. And hopefully their country has some kind of laws about how governments interact with like philanthropic institutions. But even here in the United States, we have, the CDC, and we have the CDC Foundation, which is just a pot that people pour money into for no other reason than that they care about the CDC, and they truly, truly, truly don't want anything out of that. They don't want an extra foot in the door. They don't want to be invited to closed door meetings that the public doesn't get to know about. But that's what, I think we can all assume is happening. It kind of feels odd to just say, yeah, we're the CDC, just give us money and it'll not affect us at all.
Yeah.
It was literally 4 years ago that I realized that your average person has no idea that the CDC Foundation even exists, let alone the nature of it and how it could be funnel for interests on a scale that is just it's hard to believe, really.
Yeah. Most people don't. They don't even realize that the American Cancer Society is like 51 different organizations, each with its own little tax designation, so that they.
But this is the CDC, the this is the pinnacle of all public health institutions. It's the standard, and they have a CDC Foundation, which is, well, let's just say it would be hard to believe if donations weren't somehow influenced.
Yeah.
How they frame what they're doing.
I guess philanthropy. We're friends, though. We're all friends.
Philanthropy is just a lobbyist with a lot more money. That's all it is. That's how I look at it. It
just took me forever to come to terms with the fact that was a thing. It was just mind blowing. Anyway,
I have a question from Janine. Janine's got a question for you there. Can you see it?
Oh yeah. Do I ever experience negative fallout from my articles? Bloomberg Truth. Yes and no. I sometimes, it's weird. I remember when I wrote the big expose, there was very little response to that, which I assumed was 100% a decision. It's one of the moves that the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids will do, and it's a smart move, frankly, is when there's something that truly is damaging to their message or to them as an organization, they do nothing with it. And they tell all of their friends to say nothing, don't tweet about it, don't comment on it, nothing. But I think maybe someone didn't get, one of the grantees didn't get the memo I can't remember where, I think it was in the Philippines, and wrote a little, this is all fake and lies and blah, blah, blah. And I kind of responded to that. And I was like, and I understand, I believe, I would have to double check this, but I believe that person I figured out very easily was connected to Bloomberg Philanthropies financially. I was like, yeah, no, this isn't, you can't just say like, well, it's all bullshit when it, but for the most part, I guess the blowback is like the trolls online, but I don't really, if someone ever brings up to me something that's like a factual error, I want to know about that. Like, yes, but I don't consider that to be any kind of fallout, but I mean, it's fallout for me emotionally, mentally, but yeah, no, so far so good, I guess. Maybe I should knock on wood. I should find something.
We'll do it for you too here.
I get the feeling it's going to be much like Moby Dick, after, sometime, the year that you're no longer with us, it will become a sensational piece. Okay, posthumously. No,
Yeah.
but it is one of the more thorough and truly impressive pieces of writing I've ever come across. So well done.
I'm always happy when anything, because especially the big long ones. I remember Grim Green once. Nick, he read out loud one of my very long pieces, which it was a phenomenal idea. I was like, we should always do that because they're too long to read. But yeah, no. What I find, those kind of have a shelf life of like five. It seems like 2 or 3 years after I write something like that, it starts to get attention, which I'm happy for if it helps at any point in time.
Yeah. I know you write about a lot of different stuff, and it was I kind of curious how you got into vaping. What drew you in, and were you surprised when you did write that first article how corrupt and what we were going through in this community and industry?
Wow, I don't even remember what my first one was because it was a long time ago at this point. But I do remember how I got interested in the issue. So I'd been a very light smoker in college. That college thing was literally less than like a pack a week, less than that. So not very much. But I graduated, I quit. I kind of like bummed cigarettes off people for a while. I did that on and off again, thing that everybody does. And then I got to working at the Competitive Enterprise Institute with all these young libertarian type people, and they were all smoking at that point. And I remember being shocked. Of course, I continued to bum cigarettes off of all of them, but I was shocked that these young, intelligent people were all smokers. And then over the course of a number of years, I watched basically each one of those people switch to some kind of vapor product. They each tried a bunch of different ones. They would settle on one for a while, but it was like there were maybe 7 to 10 people that I worked with who smoked. And over the course of 5 years, I think at the end of it, only 1 or 2 remained smokers. They all completely switched over. And I was like, but during that time, I started to hear the rumblings. I was writing, I think, mostly about alcohol regulations and gambling regulations. I was writing a little about food and the FDA, but I started to hear all that. Oh, the e-cigarettes are bad and dangerous. And so I started diving into the research. One, because I cared about my friends. And I found the research was like, okay, what we know sounds really good, actually. I started learning those fundamental principles about like combustion and carcinogens in traditional tobacco cigarettes. And then once I finally got it, once I realized what these newfangled products represented in terms of global public health, I do remember having a moment in my office sitting there being like, this is going to be my one F word. Fuck no, they can't ban these. My thought was they're going to kill people. Like the people, and this is just a thing for me, but when I think about innovation technology, especially in the health space, I always think about the people who died like the year before. Before the drug was approved, the people who died like a month before that life-saving drug was approved. And so, there was this sense of urgency and a real life and death kind of sense here where I was like, all of those people I know literally just quit. Like one of my friends he was on his way to a tracheotomy real fast. And he was very young, but he was on a 3-pack a day habit. And he switched completely to vapor products. And I was like, that alone probably just saved that kid's life. I was like, the idea that you would just ban these outright without even looking and said, and from there I got completely sucked in, of course. And from then on out, I felt comfortable enough to try these products. The next time I felt like bumming a smoke off of a friend, I did that instead. And it was wonderful. I mean, the first one was terrible. It was an Enjoy King, a very old school cig-alike. And the next morning my throat was insane, like on fire, because it was just a high amount of more nicotine. Because, it was the one, and it was a whole pack in one functionally, or at that point, it probably wasn't that much nicotine. But I actually am one of those kids who I knew I wanted to smoke from the age of 13, maybe around that, maybe a little younger, but I waited. And by the time I hit 19, 20, when I was in college, I was like, is there something out there that is safer? Is there are one of the cigarettes on the shelf safer than the others? Is there anything out there? And even then I was like, it seems like there should be a way. And there wasn't. So I just settled on American Spirits and said, what the hell? But if e-cigarettes had been around when I first started smoking, I would have 100% never smoked. I would have never been a cigarette smoker.
Real quick, is there anywhere else that people can find some of your other articles? Because I have the link. I posted the link, guys, on the chat, so it'll take you to the page you see on the screen right now. But I want to make sure if there's any other place to find any of your articles, I will link it in the chat as well.
Yeah, you can find it on the Reason Foundation website. I usually post things on Twitter, even though I haven't been so
Okay.
on Twitter lately. But if I write anything, you'll be sure to find it there. At least one of my colleagues will tweet it out for me. I had to take a little bit of a break from the Twitterverse over the last Musk era, just because it's been it's just for mental health issues.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you
I
were a
understand
vapor, so I'm glad that you got that out. So I got to ask you the question we ask all our vapors. What was that first flavor that got you over the hump?
It was straight like feet smelling tobacco.
Oh wow!
I shouldn't be so mean. I mean, it was the Enjoy King. It was actually it was incredibly impressive for whatever year that was, 2011, maybe 2010 even. It was so light, it was so small, it lasted an incredibly long time for a device that tiny, and
Yeah.
it picked up nicotine.
One of the very first.
Yeah.
It packed a nicotine punch, and so, but it only, I think at that point, only came in tobacco flavor. I think that was before anybody really tried any of the, the big companies tried anything other than that.
And real quick, your first experience, that first day with it, were you like most of us, like this is going to work, or did you have some optimism?
Oh no, I knew it was going to work instantly.
Yeah, nice.
Like, oh, it has everything. So for me, I had ADHD, and I didn't realize that the nicotine was helpful for me until I got into vaping. Honestly, once I was using it on a more consistent basis, then I noticed a difference. But for me, in at that point in time, I thought it was much more the tactile, the hand stuff, the smoke stuff, the kind
Ritual.
of the contemplation that kind of came along with exiting whatever social situation you were in and taking a little bit of a break for a reason. So that I was all back, and I was like, oh yeah, I can see this completely working.
Yeah, nice. Phillip.
Let me see. Question for you on most okay.
I always wait for Phillip to do this. Like,
no. One of the things that Michelle has that we share in common is fantastic taste in films, motion pictures. Thank you. Favorite film of the last 10 years, last decade?
Oh, just off the top of my head, I'm not even going to think about it. I'm just going to say Annihilation.
God help, bless you. That is the correct answer, by the way.
And now I'm going to think about that all night. But I really, when I watched that movie, I missed it when it came out in the theaters because I saw one trailer for it and I was like, oh my God, this looks amazing. And then I forgot about it. And I was like, oh, it's already streaming. What? So
that's not always good.
Well, once I saw it, I understood exactly what happened because it was one of those movies almost destined to. It's the thing that everybody always asks for, and then it came out like a science fiction, a hard sci-fi movie, completely. The cast was almost entirely like strong women, not playing it passed the Bechdel test immediately. With women talking almost never about men. It was horrifying. There were moments of truly disturbing moments in that movie, which I rarely get in because I'm a bit of a horror movie fan. Not the biggest one, but I like horror. And so I was like, oh, I don't usually get actually disturbed by moments in movies. It was a phenomenal movie.
Alex Garland has gone from everything he does. It was an Ex Machina. I can never pronounce it right. Ex Machina. And before that, I mean, he's written some great books. Like for the example, I think The Beach is maybe the best like short little read I've ever just like gone through in an hour. But he's also written a few of the things like The Tesseract, which I enjoyed, which was a terrible movie, by the way. But as far as his direction, I think he wrote the screenplay for 28 Days Later.
Sunshine.
But Sunshine was so underrated. But in terms of this film, I think you and I were on Twitter at the same time, just like we both said at the same time, Annihilation is fucking incredible.
It's a really good game. I mean, it's not for everyone. I've shown it to some people who they don't get it, or it doesn't appeal to their it appealed to me in a very specific way. But anyway, I could talk about movies all day long.
No, the possibilities, the science fiction meets actual possibility on a very, very, it sticks with you forever. And I think the more you watch it, the better it actually gets. Not easier it gets to contemplate those possible realities. But yeah,
I'll say that the score is also incredibly good and disturbing at points in time. It's like It Follows. I love the music in It Follows, but I cannot listen to it because it's too. I'm always like, Is there someone's gonna kill me? Like
That single acoustic guitar picking score, it's really it's so good.
Well, I got a follow-up question to Philip's question now that Philip brought up a movie. So I got to ask you, what is your favorite line from any movie?
Okay, I'll do the line and you tell me if you can think of a movie. Okay. That son of a bitch. That son of a bitch. You son of a bitch! That's a common one in my household. I like this.
Only because Nick wasn't on the show last week. What is Nick's favorite line from a movie?
Oh God, dude, come on.
We all have one.
What's yours? Tell me yours.
Well, my number one is leave the gun, take it to cannolis, and then the second one is one of my favorites, and it makes me laugh every time I see this movie. But there's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball. It's one of my favorite lines in the movie. Just seeing Tom Hanks yelling at her, "Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying in baseball."
You guys are good. I'm on a whole different planet right now with this movie lines.
Yeah, I would do my Rushmore, Wes Anderson quotes right now, but I think it would probably take up too much more time of the show. But yes, most of my favorite quotes do come from, I would say, the Wes Anderson films that I love, and not the more recent ones. Sorry, they're just not nearly as good or thoughtful.
Mine comes from Quentin Tarantino movies and Reservoir Dogs and Scarface and shit like that.
Oh, I do have a good Quentin Tarantino one that I like. I don't say it, but I do like it a lot. It's my ass might be dumb, but I'm not a dumbass.
I'm not a dumbass. Paul, we never asked you. Might as well ask.
Oh, that's a very, very, very simple answer for me. In the Pipe, 5x5.
What's that from?
What is that?
Aliens. The drop down in the drop down ship. You're on an elevator ride to hell. Yeehaw!
I guess as a percentage of quotes, I actually say one of them is from. Is it Aliens? The first one? No, the one with Bill Paxton. I definitely say a lot like "Game over, man." Like definitely.
That's Aliens. Yeah.
Game over. Oh man, that's good. And we got to ask you one of our newer questions. If you, I got to ask you this. If you could put any franchise restaurant in your house, what would it be?
Oh shit!
Oh my god, a franchise restaurant? I almost never go to that. I guess Taco Bell would be a bad answer. I would never get any work done ever again. Ooh, I guess. I don't know. You know what? I would probably do a Wendy's.
A Wendy's?
Probably do a Wendy's because they have a good shake and fry combo that I like.
There you go, the fries and the shake.
I can see that. Wendy's is dependably, it's Wendy's. And then, of course, you get that Big Mac once every several years that's just the perfect Big Mac. Everything's in the right proportion, and it screws up everything that you thought you knew about junk food. It's painful.
Yeah.
It is.
Nick, do you have a real question for our guest?
P.F. Chang's.
P.F. Chang's. Ooh, yeah.
That's got to take up a lot of square footage.
That's a good one, though.
We didn't talk about square footage.
Yeah.
True.
I'm curious what Paul, what would be your franchise there? Because I'm waiting for an Australian one.
Oh God, no, it's not going to be an Australian one. In-N-Out Burger, bring it on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, animalize everything. Animalize everything.
Are those exciting? I've never had one.
Oh, they're good.
They're fantastic.
Are they better than White Castle?
Yep.
You sure they're better than White Castle, man? Because White Castle is the best.
No, White Castle's.
Let's just say the day after is a little bit rough, but yes,
you gotta
you have to make a run on Cottonelle at the same time.
When you're thinking about answering this question, you gotta assume breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you gotta make sure whatever place you're picking, you're gonna be able to get all those three things. So breakfast is
They have real eggs at In-N-Out. So
there you go.
Not that powdered crap.
There was a time when I would have said Jack in the Box, but then I think there was an E. coli thing. And
since I know you are a fun guest, I think we're gonna get away with this one, boys. I think we're gonna get away with this question. Here we go.
Where's this going?
All of a sudden, her camera goes
the
dead.
first song you learned all the words to as a teenager, and can you sing a few bars of it? The first song you learned all the words as a teenager. You remember learning. You're like, oh, this song is great. I got to learn all the words to it. Or you read the. I'm assuming your age CD cover. I'm not going to say album cover, but CD.
Wait a minute. Yeah, I think it might have been Shoop by Salt and Pepper. I remember singing that with my little white girlfriends in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
All right, we will see. We will help you sing it if you need us to.
Wait, okay. How's it start? Wait, here I go again, girls. What's my weakness? Man, okay, then chillin', minding my business. Oh no, you saw I looked around and I couldn't believe it. I swear, my niece, my witness. I can't remember any more than that.
Oh, that's good though.
Bravo!
Man. Yeah.
Wow, I remembered that much of it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Masterful.
Oh, at least I didn't pick one where I had to sing.
Yeah, no. I think we've only had one person that said no. So,
Everybody in the house is dancing right now.
yeah, everybody.
It said no, but she mentioned one, and we all broke out in song, and everybody was happy.
Yeah.
Right,
But I hope that doesn't go viral in any way.
I'm counting on it, actually.
Screen capture that.
Mr. Paul, do you have a question for our guest? He actually did that.
No, I'm thinking about this one. If we could get you documentation from Australia, would you be willing to go down that rabbit hole and try and give us a little bit more of a hand here, trying to understand what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, honestly, what's going on in Australia, really. I honestly do, and I'm not saying this, there's people all over the world who are doing amazing coordinating work on our side of the things, right? This is one of those things where you look at, I mean, none of us want to be fighting Bloomberg. None of us want to be fighting Bloomberg philanthropies. None of us want to be fighting the CDC or the FDA or any of these people, but they are on the opposite side of good science and history at this point. And so when you look at what's on the other side of this, unfortunately, it needs to be a globally coordinated thing like they are doing. That is what they're doing, and that's kind of what we need to be doing. And I think we need bigger teams, but one of the things we need are research money, right? Because a lot of the work we do, or a lot of what they do, comes out of research institutions. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all pretty interested in Australia just because of how bad it's getting and how recalcitrant the government is about addressing, even just acknowledging the fact that what they're doing isn't working. So I think everyone would be interested in kind of diving into that a little bit more. Honestly, I'd have to see what we could find. When I tried to, you mentioned the FOIA request taking 2 years. That's about how long it takes here in the U.S. too. When you're doing a Freedom of Information Act, a records request in the United States.
Wow.
To a federal government agency, it takes about 2 years. I remember I did one, and knowing exactly the document I wanted, and it existed. It took them about 2 years to get it back to me, and they gave it to a journalist first. They gave it to a journalist.
That's incredible.
The journalist emailed me and he was like, "Hey, did you file a FOIA request? Because I filed one like this month," and they said, "Sure, it'll be easy to get it to you because someone else already did this 2 years ago." But yes, like any information that comes out would garner interest from me and other researchers out there, right? Because once you see the first signs of something rotten, you really want to get to the bottom of that. I guess to carry the analogy forward, rotten meat, like iceberg. I don't know. Sure. Why not? But yeah, no. Honestly, there's so many. This is the problem with someone or two people, and I also don't want to let Gates off the hook here because I feel like he is the one who has really kind of fallen asleep at the wheel. Like he is the one who isn't an anti-tobacco or a born-again non-smoker zealot. I think he truly thinks he's doing this for good reasons, that the outcome will be what all of the people around him are telling him the outcome will be of pursuing these types of policies. And I think him and his people are smarter than that if somebody can just kind of reach them on that.
So in that regard, would you say that Gates, there's a possibility where he can be, he can understand the unintended consequences of what he's doing, whereas you have a Mike Bloomberg, which is decidedly not. That's not a possibility there.
I mean, I don't write on. Shockingly, I don't even write anybody off, even Michael Bloomberg, and I can explain why that is. That's fairly new, but yeah, I think with Gates, he's not been shy about saying this. He's one of those philanthropists who doesn't kind of like sugarcoat it all the time. So he said he is interested in having a healthy working population, and he hasn't said this, but I assume like a healthy political environment for whatever his business goals are. So I think if you can convince him that something like e-cigarettes, nicotine pouches, the non-combustibles as a replacement actually would result in a healthier working population if that's what you're after. Yeah, I think his mind could be changed. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the guy personally or really at all, but I think from what I understand about his business operations and his philanthropic operations, I'd say there's something going on in there that could probably be addressed. Unless it's like with research here in the tobacco field, where it's really about fear and shame and ostracization and excommunication. If that's what's happening somewhere in the Gates philanthropic institutions, then I don't know. But because that's a real thing that we've all acknowledged. I think we're all aware of that excommunication thing and this like public pillorying and shaming of anybody for any reason. Well, I mean, there's a reason, but they'll find the reason to shame, discredit, and silence you if you disagree with whatever the party line is.
Yeah.
Well, that's optimistic to me, encouraging at the very least, because as you aptly point out, the people that make up the foundation are a bit smarter than what you would find at Bloomberg and what have you.
And I would like to think the same is actually true at Vital Strategies. Like the people who are working on, with Bloomberg funding Vital Strategies, obviously their work on tobacco is I don't know how to put it, criminal. Like it's bad. It's bad.
It's bad.
When you're cheering on horrible human rights violating, dictators and stuff like that, you're in problematic territory. That's the time to look around and be like, am I surrounded by Nazis? Maybe I'm on the wrong side of the crowd here. If you're going arm in arm with dictators. But the people who are working on the opioid harm reduction project that Bloomberg is now apparently, throwing lots of money at, which maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Those folks who are working on that side, they seem to be pretty disconnected from the tobacco stuff. And they seem to be pursuing harm reduction in all of the ways that harm reduction is classically pursued for all issues, for all of those particular public health. So I almost feel like, Mike Bloomberg's never going to listen to me. He's never going to listen to any of us. He's never going to listen to maybe anybody. But, if you have the harm reduction people working on opioids in Vital Strategies talking to the people who do work on tobacco harm reduction of Vital Strategies, maybe Vital Strategies, if their goal is to actually, if the mandate they've been given by Bloomberg is to actually achieve a good outcome in terms of public health, then maybe they can convince him. But of course, I think we all know that's probably not the mandate that they have. The mandate is probably get laws passed, ban things.
Yeah.
I reread.
Hold on, Phillip. Hold on,
Go
Phillip. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the articles that you wrote about marijuana and legalizing marijuana and recreational marijuana. But I want you to touch on a little bit of what they did right and what we need to change and do right on our end.
Yeah, I mean, the cannabis issue compared to nicotine, I know that's something we've all been kind of fascinated watching as states legalize, and there's a really strong and robust conversation around it, and a conversation about all the things we kind of always wish they would talk about when they're debating banning nicotine products. But I think one of the things that really happened, for one thing, you have exactly what I was kind of talking about before. You have really in the background, you have somebody like an Ethan Nadelman at the Drug Policy Alliance, convincing a powerful person like George Soros that decriminalizing drugs, that ending the war on drugs is going to have the outcome that that George Soros thinks is a good outcome, which in this case is fewer people going to jail, fewer people losing their lives, livelihoods, families breaking up, all of that. And luckily, George Soros cared about those things, apparently. So he funded a lot of the effort to end the war on drugs. I think one of the key things that happened with cannabis in particular that has not really happened with nicotine yet and absolutely needs to happen at this point is that the NIH issued a grant for institutions to study the medical benefits of cannabis. to study the medical applications, the therapeutic benefits of cannabis. So that grant was the National Academies of Science and Engineering and Medicine. They got that grant, and they did this enormous kind of just, meta-analysis basically and review of all the literature. And at the what they functionally produced was this thing saying, here are a stack of benefits that we've already identified, like therapeutic uses for cannabis. And once there was that validation for, it's not just recreation, which is crappy that we need that, but as a society, apparently we need that when it comes to vice.
But when you say they've been doing that for at least the last 100 years with nicotine, there should be a shit ton of medical benefits.
There is, but there isn't any kind of like definitive government approved functioning of government.
That is true.
That there are medical benefits, and recognizing things like the psychological, the mood benefits, the physical benefits that some people get from it. If you're talking about seizure disorders or whatever, they don't, you have a million different little articles and papers and studies that aren't ever replicated. They just don't really, but once you have that conversation started, I think in the nicotine use space, this type of conversation is centered around like, it's something I enjoy. It's a little pleasure that I enjoy. And that honestly should be enough for people, but it isn't. And I think we do need a big kind of NIH funded, just a really close look at what are the potential therapeutic applications of nicotine. We know this, there are already patents out there, I'm sure. I think I already know of one, but I haven't been able to confirm, therapeutic things like for dermatitis or eczema. So it's like, okay, there are benefits.
Dementia, they've been trying it for mental,
Oh, I mean, that's a huge, that 30 was a not 30-year study, but a very long, the MIND study that Paul Newhouse has been kind of shepherding, a multi-center study. That's obviously, when you have something out there like that, or the Parkinson's studies, really.
The Parkinson's.
Tourette's.
That's what Tourette's. The government has an absolute duty at that point when those two like long-term Parkinson's studies with huge numbers of participants came out with huge effects. The correlation between some kind of tobacco product, nicotine use, and not getting Parkinson's was enormous. And you're like, at that point, as a government institution that studies this kind of stuff, you have a duty to fund grants to look further into that, because we're talking about conditions that affect huge numbers of people.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, Nick. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
How long do you think it'll take before they start accepting some of this? Because Indiana University, I mean, they've been studying nicotine in younger people with, say, Tourette's, whether it's injectable or patches or topical or vapor or whatever the delivery. Do we have to be around, do you feel, as long as hemp does before we even get a look? Because the studies are there. It doesn't, I mean, they're funded. In Indiana, it's funded. I don't know who it's funded by, but there's a lot going on throughout the country, I've heard. And I wonder how long it's going to take. I mean, is it time? Do we just wait?
I think it's a combination of time and political factors, right? So with cannabis, one of the things that really drove legalization forward was that a bunch of white kids in California started getting arrested for possession, right? And then all of the parents groups, all of the mom groups came out saying, we need a softer war on drugs. We not our kids functionally, but that kind of kick-started an entire movement across the country with people also concerned.
Thank you, Nancy Reagan.
Yeah, but so I've been worried about this for, I don't know, the last 10 years, where I've been thinking in the back of my head, I hope we don't have to see the same thing before people take a real look at these products and the way that they're being regulated. Like, I hope people don't have to get tased or shot or arrested or choked to death before Americans start to kind of...
today's mom, they just get together called PAVE and they try to just ban it. That's funded. So
I don't know what those ladies are trying to do. I think they're just trying to get a little bit closer to the guy with the microphone at the press conference, as close as they possibly can for as long as they can.
The lean in, No, I think a lot of it has to do is just the way it's applied with vaping. And I think it affects so many other industries, and not just the nicotine end of it, but just how nicotine is used and how effective it is with vaping. I think it affects the pharmaceutical companies, it affects the tobacco companies. And I think that's where the bottom line is where we're never going to win this fight, because I know big tobacco is nowhere near the pharmaceutical companies when it comes to money and having the right people in the right place. But I think just the way it's applied and how well it's worked is what's hurting us.
Yeah, I mean, I bet the sort of weirdly the fun thing about it is that we've already won, at least in the United States, unless our society and culture really takes a big shift in the next decades. But they are not going to do what it sounds like they're about to do in Australia. Unfortunately, I'm very sorry about that. I hope this doesn't happen. But coming into people's homes and looking for vape devices, unless they've got like hundreds and hundreds of thousands, right? Unless they're like,
Yeah.
so the cat's out of the bag. Right,
Yeah.
and this is true globally. Even when you have a scenario with like a government really enforcing prohibition with an iron fist, the cat's out of the bag. This device and ingredient combination stuff is not that complicated. It isn't that complicated, and sourcing the ingredients aren't that hard because they're very common ingredients. So this isn't going anywhere. These alternative non-combustible forms of nicotine consumption are never going anywhere. They're going to change for sure, depending on what happens culturally and what happens politically and all that other stuff, and what happens with the health information. I remember in the very beginning with the forums and everything where people were talking, a study would come out. People were like, just average consumers were reading scientific literature, and a study, the conversation about diacetyl started, and I watched the companies and people on the forum start talking about like getting it out, and they did it on their own pretty quickly. Like, it was from all of the major brands. It was and statements saying like, we don't have this. And I actually saw the same thing in the cannabis industry after EVALI, where you started to see with the carts, the cannabis cartridges that were for sale. Obviously, they brought in the QR codes, which is great, even though the illicit market has started to kind of figure that out too. But one of the things they started, telling people on their websites or wherever they printed stuff was that we don't have these types of solvents, in our products to kind of, and good for them that none of them want to actually say the words EVALI or vitamin E acetate because it would freak people out. But, like, we don't have any weird shit in here. And I was like, okay, so like the industry can respond, but what's been happening in the vapor market, in the e-cig industry for the last 5-6 years is not as much innovation, at least not as much innovation. That
it slowed down. It has slowed down.
And the back and forth, the participatory nature of it, it had such a participation kind of feel to it in the beginning, with the consumers feeding information to smaller companies.
Well, the reason I say that, there wasn't this huge attack on nicotine when the patch came out. There wasn't this huge attack on nicotine when the oral, what do you call them? They call them patches. The chewing,
lozenges, gums,
right. And I get, I mean, there's a lot of nicotine products that have come out, and you haven't seen this attack. And I get it. Most, we get the kid factor. You add the kid factor, that changes everything. And probably, I read your article. Yeah, kids aren't going to put patches in their mouth. They're not going to do that.
The thing that it's a very slow release. It's a completely different delivery. Now, nicotine mists and inhalers, that's maybe a little bit different, where you have that immediate satisfaction. But comparing these things to transdermal patches or lozenges or even gums, it's not quite the same thing. And to be honest, but I do believe that when you come out with fruit flavored Nicorette mist, then we're getting into hypocrisy territory.
Yeah. So much for consumer choice.
I've got one. I've got one for Michelle. You're going to love this. You're going to absolutely love this. Okay, under the current law, or what's been proposed. Okay, here's where it gets even goofier from like a chemistry standpoint. Now, under the current law and the current way it's written, nicotine inhalers should be back on the prescription model. Right now, they have to go back and rewrite that whole section on nicotine inhalers to be allowed to be on the shelf as a consumer product. But that exact same device without the heating component is a disposable. In like, from an engineering standpoint, it's exactly the same device, except one's heated, one's not. One creates a vapor, one creates a mist, but they're both mouth operated. Okay, they both draw inhalation, and that's where the sneaky part is, because we turned around in a conversation I had with someone late last night. I said, what if we turned around and we got rid of the batteries in disposables, and we turned them all into inhaling systems. Game over, Red Rover. We just beat you at your own game.
Yeah, they must have to put some language in there about like approved cessation, like because that's what they do in America. Where it's when one of the states or the localities tries to pass something and they want to exempt, the that they say FDA approved cessation therapies.
Right. But we can beat them at their own game here because we can use their same chemistry.
Yeah.
Like like exactly.
You heard
the
it
same
here first.
chemistry.
No, I'm kidding.
Well, I'm a flavorist.
I like your
Michelle.
idea.
That's what I do for a living, pretty much. I develop flavors for the industry.
And China
So-
somehow, some way, will bedazzle them and make them consumer available. So they
Yeah,
will
I
add
think it could
colors.
be. I
they
think
will
it
add-
could be quite funny. No, I think it could be quite funny because if you go back to the original GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, the testing, when they were testing these products, they did release a tobacco flavored inhaler, and the flavoring results that came back from it was absolutely garbage. They couldn't handle what was coming out the end of their little inhaler. So I just thought, in this little group that I had a chat with last night, well, let's go back and let's use their nicotine, right? Let's use our flavorings and let's completely turn this on its head and go, well, kiss it, because we're playing your game now. We're releasing a pharmaceutical product.
I'd like to see if that would, if there would be a market for that as a kind of more consumer, like less because the inhaler was basically an e-cigarette in the U.S. The pharmaceutical, and it didn't take off because nobody liked it. It was bland and white, plain packaged. It was all very bland and medicinal and not fun. And that one of the things we all missed, I think, most of us missed about smoking, was that it was fun, it was enjoyable, and it's hard to. But I think this is honestly what the tobacco control people want is like at heart, whether they think this, in their actual minds, like consciously, but they want us to do penance. They want us to do atonement, and that's what the patch and the pills, lozenges that taste like medicine, and you're like, they don't want you to like quit and get healthier while also still having fun.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great idea, but I think there are some individuals out there that need to see that vapor, need to have that ritual that you have with the cigarette. And I know I was one of those. I had to see that vapor. I had to, there was times where I didn't realize I had this in my hand for like 20, 30, 40 minutes.
The throat hit.
The throat hit. Yeah. You got to have that throat hit.
The ritual, and that's what I think Juul did so well. They finally found something that smokers came back and they were like, "This is enough nicotine. The delivery device works. This is replacing cigarettes." And I think Adam, one of the co-founders of Juul, is one of the ones who was actually able to quit, and that was after Plume and all the crap and packs, blah blah blah. But yes, I think that what we're missing here is what helps people who smoke quit, adults, who smoke quit.
Yeah, and I'm all for anything that helps.
Anything, right?
If any single person needs this particular device, flavor, nicotine combination, whatever, they should be able to have it because it's it's their life on the line, functionally. And I'm like, even if it's the very low nicotine cigarettes that are going to be introduced, these like functionally zero. If that is the thing, that there's one lifelong smoker out there who needs it needs to be a cigarette. The nicotine isn't important, but it needs to be a cigarette. And that's how they get off. Like that's how they eventually quit smoking. Then yeah, absolutely. That should be an option. Great. Go for it. But our government has this like real hard time with subtlety and variation and like lots of options and flexibility. So they're just like, we don't want to tell you to only use this one thing, but here we're going to give you these 3 options. Like you get this one that kind of smells like feet. You get this one that was old when we approved it. It was already outdated when we approved it. And maybe you'll get something that's like kind of a crappy eucalyptus, very lightly minted thing eventually.
But that's another funny part.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, because Mr. Orlando needs to leave here in a few minutes. I want him to kind of say goodbye to you, Michelle. So,
Michelle, thank you. It was great talking to you.
It was awesome. Nick Orlando, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it was nice meeting you.
Nick Orlando, right? Yeah.
Play in the chat.
But we met a couple of times, but it was at different places and different times, but I do follow you, and I appreciate everything you do. Obviously more so for the nicotine stuff, but I appreciate everything you do.
Oh, Chef, thank you.
And thank you for joining the team today. And John,
Hey,
thank
Nick,
you for having me.
we missed you, Nick. It's been so long. We missed you, man.
You know, man, I've been so out of it with this new build out and stuff. I'm just trying to get everything situated, you know.
Yeah.
And Phillip,
Thanks for coming on and tolerating us, though. I appreciate it.
no, man, thanks for having me. You kidding me? It's an honor. Drop Bears.
And before you go,
I hope to see you soon, Nick. I'm actually good on the tools as well. So
Don't threaten me with a good time. Just get here.
yeah.
All right.
And before you go, Nick, you know I got to say this: go Rams. That's it. That's all I have to say, buddy.
Rams.
Bye.
Bye. You guys take care. Thank you so much,
Nick.
Michelle.
buddy.
Be safe.
Take care, Mr. Nick.
Do my best.
Poor Nick's going to have a very losing season there in Tampa Bay. No, I'm kidding.
He looks
No comment.
despondent.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious your take on the whole Jewel situation, Michelle.
Oh boy, yeah, that's so. I mean, one of the big things coming up. I'm not sure if I'll be in the final cut, but there, there's a docuseries coming out on Netflix called Big Vape, based on the book Big Vape by Jamie Ducharme, I think is how you pronounce her last name.
Ducharme.
I read the book the weekend it came out, and it was you could clearly tell she was trying to be even-handed. So one can only. I sat down for like 4 hours with them under hot lights. So I might be in the final cut of the movie, but I think a few other people will all be familiar with. That made me feel pretty good when I heard at least one of the other people that they interviewed. I'm like, all right, they do seem to be doing due diligence, but from that book, with Jewel, like reading that was really enlightening because there was some very,
very
revelatory information, and just telling the story of these two kids who came up with this good idea and kind of went into, Jamie Ducharme kind of portrays it as an unclear how intentional they went in and whether things were laziness or, whatever. But there was just pursuit of profit too fast. But it really does read like everything reads like two kids who were arrogant, very smart, but a great idea, and they knew it. And it could have been successful, but they made a lot of missteps and ran into an industry without understanding the pile of shit, just the 30, 40-year pile of crap and fighting and just like research and all of that they were walking into with complete blinders on, and they stumbled because of that. They never got over their initial stumbles when they were a young, do things fast and break thing kind of company. All of that kept getting dragged back at them. Or they're like, look at this, your first initial launch campaign. And you're like, it's their first initial launch campaign.
It really is a tragic story. And I think more than anything, if they had simply consulted a few old school, tobacco people affiliated with tobacco companies and people in tobacco control, they would have, instead of using the cigarette papers as a model for their advertising campaigns, they would have used that as a cautionary tale. And they were just that naive and that cocksure, if you will, that it was going to be a huge hit. And when they came out with their campaign, Vaporized, etc., it was only on billboards and what have you for a month. But as soon as it came out looking very much like cigarette advertising from the past, it was all over.
It's also like, people are like, look, it looks exactly like the Chevron. And I'm like, well, okay, cigarette advertising is some of the most classic advertising in the world. You don't think every advertising
some of the most effective, right?
In the back of their head already. But maybe it was intentional, but also advertising.
All they were missing was the Marlboro Man. That was all they were missing. The Marlboro Man and the Winston guy.
But as far as the statement that they were targeting kids, I think that's absurd. Really absurd. But did they appeal to it? Sure.
They had as much.
I think they flipped. They flipped the way the market was going. I think because at that present time when that product came out, I think it was right at the verge where we started getting colored devices. We started getting, lights on our mobs. We started getting all these things, Bluetooth. And I think do you think that kind of pushed them in that direction to go at that way with their average? I know what it's still their decision. It's still their decision. They could have told the advertising company, you know what, we don't want to go this way. But do you think that the way the market was going in the vaping industry may have influenced the PR people to go that way with the advertisement?
Maybe. I think that the guys, the founders and the team, they told their firm that the target demographic that they wanted to hit was the cool kids.
Cool kids.
And it's a very specific age range of like 22, 24 to like 29, 30 maybe. And you're like
30-ish.
That's a real fine line between minor and adults. It's not really legally obvious. It's like 4 or 5 years, but when you're advertising at that group, it gets real dicey. Public health people who are at these universities, people who, whatever, they're anti-tobacco, they're anti-alcohol, they're anti-drugs, they're anti-whatever. They're always kind of looking for anything that could possibly even potentially look like it might be targeted at kids. If they're like, oh, this ad showed up for 7:59 in the evening when 2% of kids watch a show.
During the Cartoon Network.
and I'll be honest, here's one of the things where I'm a little not upset with. I think, as we all are, over the years have become irritated with Juul, with their behavior, with the decisions that they've made that have harmed the prospects for the entire industry. Or that were used to harm the entire industry. But one of those things is Juul never talking about that thing where they advertise on the cartoon. They did an ad campaign and it showed up on apparently the Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, or like a bunch of places.
Nickelodeon.
Some of us theorized that it was algorithmic, and that the actual company didn't get a say in where those but the company itself has never answered that question. They've never, and I'm sure it has to do with litigation.
I think if they would have looked at their numbers at the very beginning, because I thought it was brilliant. I thought I've talked about this before in the show. I think they came out with a product that finally fit the guy with the suit, the guy that was the business guy that is in that 35 to 40 range, that finally had a product they were okay with taking out of their suit and using in front of other people, and not have, this is great. They didn't want this. They wanted that nice slim black device, no fancy colors, no bejeweled, not pink.
Light paper too, not super. And response to the big mods where, and the conversation about douchiness. In those years before Juul, I started hearing tons and tons of stand-up comedians making jokes and lots whatever. The jokes about the douchey vapor guy. And I think Juul did want to change that, and they were targeting women too. Like, it's slim, it's light, it's not, you're not like up in people's faces blowing giant clouds at them.
If they would have stuck with that, I think
and
it would have been.
They made a couple of, they made plenty of serious errors, oversights. They were not watching they took their eyes off the ball, and they were letting other people that really didn't understand the gravity of even, resembling a big tobacco campaign. But there were a couple of states in which they had these giveaways. They would show up at convenience stores and just give random people, hey, try this, and have a free Juul starter kit. And they weren't even making sure that they were current smoker people.
I remember I was at an event and this was with Enjoy Kings too. Like I remember, or I probably whatever. I was at an event where they were being given away for free. And I was just like, and it was a friendly organization event, but I was like, ooh, this is probably a bad idea. Not because of anything, but like this is the fodder for news headlines.
And I'm so glad that Big Vape has people like yourself and Clive and Greg and Julie and Alex. They're all well quoted and represented. Both sides of the debate are surprisingly well represented. And I do hope that the Netflix, whoever is in charge of that project, does include your contribution.
I hope so too.
I mean, I hope it's as well balanced as the book, because it was surprisingly well told. It wasn't told.
I think
Juul. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, even with Juul, they priced that product at a point where they knew it would not be affordable to a teenager. I mean, there was no way a teenager was going to justify almost $30 to start for the starter kit. Was it even more than that at the time?
It was really expensive.
It was more than that. It was like $50, right? Yeah. Am I thinking the starter kit was like $50?
Like 2014.
It was the device. It was the device, and I think it was a pack of 3 pods. But I will give the company kudos for 2 things though. All right.
Mhm.
They looked at using other forms of nicotine in their product when they first came out. Then sure, they got a patent for some reason on benzoic acid based nicotine, yet they took that idea from the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry first wanted to use that back in the day instead of polyacrylics, and they didn't think it was good enough to go forward, so they dropped the idea on its head. I will give them credit where it's due because they've also helped open up the market now to the synthetic forms of nicotine. They were the ones that actually partly bankrolled it when salts became more readily available. And they've also helped open the doorways, like from a chemistry standpoint, that now synthetic nicotines are being used more openly instead of relying on extraction from the tobacco leaf or from the tobacco stem. So no, I give them credit where it's due, but they did fault a lot. And if you have a look at advertising from around the world and the way that they looked at it, yeah, they did fault in that respect. But from a chemistry standpoint, wow.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. They deserve so much. Like and that's the tragedy that we talked about in the beginning, is that they created at that time literally the best smoking cessation device for the most number of people that had ever been invented. You know, all respect to Han Lick, but you know, Juul comes in and it's just like, it is exactly what the biggest number of people needed, right? It's the right amount of nicotine, and with the chemistry, you're right, that line graph of just comparing the nicotine absorption to cigarette smoking to Juul, it was almost 1-to-1. So you're like, for the hardcore lifetime smokers, this is perfect. It's easy. The pod, it's clean. You know, it's expensive, but whatever. You know, if you're actually ditching cigarettes, it's such a shame that they became the poster child for the problems of vaping and functionally, you know, like a bully kneeling down behind a kid and then the other one pushing over. You know, the government was kind of like all the governments and the attorneys generals and the lawsuits were swirling around, and the lawsuits were coming, and Juul, you know, was like, we're not going to be, you know, you read it in the book now where they're like, we're literally not going to survive. We don't have enough money. So they had to sell out to big tobacco. And of course, then that's the fodder of the campaign for tobacco. We knew it. They were always big tobacco. And you're like, you made them do that.
This is big tobacco behind the curtains.
Yeah, but CTFK and the rest of these body part organizations, right? They advertise Juul heavier than their own advertising firm. That was the stupidity of it, right?
Don't you think if they would have stuck with the same advertisement Blue did when Blue came out, they would have been okay?
No, probably not.
No, even with Blue, because Blue was clean. There was adults.
They would have they would have Hawkeyed them forever until they found anything.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I agree.
Before Juul, before vaping really was like a news story, Campaign for Tobacco Free Kid had been going through a series of things that they were trying to turn into like scares, where they're like, the mints, the nicotine mints. Oh, now people are getting seizures from vapes. And when then E-Valley came in, it was just everything's over. So like it was perfect to like, but no, that's what these, you know, Dragon Slayers do.
Yeah.
Is they start out with usually a very good mission. In this case, it was in the 1970s, basically, getting people to stop smoking, which is killing an enormous number of people. Great, wonderful. Did a pretty good job educating people, and then it started to disappear, and so they had to look for something else to like slay so that they could keep making grant money.
I only say that because I bring this story up a lot on the show, but I've never heard anybody call somebody, and granted the way social media is today, but I don't hear people calling their kids and saying, you got to try this, you got to vape. Because when Blue came out, that was a phone call I got from my mom. My mom's like, hey, I saw this on the Phil Donahue show. You should go try this. I'm like, what the hell's this? I didn't see that happening. And I knew it. I don't know what happened with Blue. Blue was my first device. And once I found the Cardos, I was done. I was like, okay, I can fill this up myself. I can go get new different cartridges. I can switch it. I can do all this stuff. And I made the transition. But for that point in time, you didn't hear anything. They were in magazine. Yeah, there. Yeah. Then you got the newer one, right?
Huh?
Yeah. I mean, that was a company that was absolutely praised by everyone when it came out. Blue was like,
It's a
finally
sale at
everybody.
Penny's.
That's pretty.
Yeah, everyone finally in America was like, oh my God, great. Something finally for the smoker to help him quit.
Yeah.
And then from Blue to where we are at today, it's like it's a whole different friggin' ballgame, man.
It's really sad, honestly. You know, I was home with my extended family in Levittown, Pennsylvania recently, and there was a period of time where a bunch of my family still smokes, and they've, you know, over the decades, they've all tried to quit periodically, and a bunch of them had switched over to vaping, and I was pretty excited. I was trying not to be the vape nerd and be like, "Yours," but you know, I came back and I noticed a pack of cigarettes sitting on the table with my cousin, and I was like, "Oh, you're smoking again." I was like, "What happened to the vaping?" And it was, I kind of triggered what is very understandable in a lot of smokers. It's like kind of shame reaction and defensiveness because he's been told his whole life by literally everybody that he's a piece of crap for smoking and he's dumb for smoking. And why can't you just quit? And you're killing your kids.
Cold turkey.
Yeah. And so there's this like defensiveness, and I see that in smokers all the time. I see it in vapors all the time. It's like that kind of thing is like, man, some people are right on the edge of going back to smoking just because of that internal, just like turmoil. And that's one of the things that I really hate when I see from, even when I truly do believe, I'm not saying the campaign for tobacco free kids is, you know, well motivated, but even when I think, I'm like, they could actually think they're just completely in the right here and they're doing a good thing, but you're like, but you still have to turmoil. Even if the ends even if the ends were good, the means don't justify it because you're causing all of this like harm and stigma. And the, like, for example, the depression sticks was again, I do throw the word criminal around, but I was like, this is like public health malpractice.
That's the most deplorable thing I've ever seen, really.
To be using a mental health condition as a way to sell your campaign against a product. And like, I understand why, but you're like, there's kids now who've tried cigarettes or tried vaping, who have depression, because a lot of kids do, who are probably going to get the message either verbally or just they're going to do it to themselves, saying, I did this to myself. I guess I deserve to be depressed.
Yeah, I just wish we'd have just a fair fight. That's all in the national media. I mean, share both sides, and it's frustrating to see just this abundance of fucking negativity all day long. And we joke about it, but here I'm seeing those damn ads on Hulu. I don't need to see anti-vaping commercials on my Hulu channel. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? You know, when's Netflix going to make the transition?
I was convinced that Truth Initiative's depression stick campaign was going to be the end of them, because how in God's name? I mean, high school, middle school. I mean, it's stressful enough as is it not? Okay, do you really need to make some ridiculous association, or rather say that this causes depression, as opposed to think for a second, well, what came first? But not only did they get away with it, they were given bloody awards for it.
Yeah,
I could not. Yes,
that's happening. The thing that really pisses me off the most, like, I expect that from Truth, I expect it from Campaign and Bloomberg, like all of those. But and I've done this repeatedly. It's the tobacco issue. They've toxified the tobacco issue so much that organizations that exist to represent people who have mental health conditions like depression said nothing. They did not come to the defense of and that's the stuff where I'm like, that's why there's no way that the tobacco control organizations have that much power, that, you know, professionals, physicians outside of this toxic world are so afraid. And I see it all the time in the broader harm reduction community when we're talking about, you know, drugs harm reduction or sex work harm reduction or all that other stuff, is when you try to draw the parallel when it's appropriate between what's happening with nicotine and what has happened with drugs in the past. They don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because they know the cost, the real cost campaign of getting involved with this issue and not towing the party line is you lose your entire career and you get slandered. You're a tobacco, you're labeled on some website run by a guy who pays the people who run the website to say you're a shill for the rest of your life on that website.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Glover got put into that position 110%. She worked for the other side for so many years. Okay. She was in tobacco control. Then when she came out, when she actually looked at the science and went, I'm wrong. Everyone lost their shit and they black banned her. And, you know, the shit fuckery that went on with,
I actually wrote a piece about, I wrote a piece called something like the excommunication of like a physician, because it was so shocking to me, the little whisper campaign. And we've seen that now, of course. Now I've seen it dozens of times over with, like Jean-Pierre, I don't remember, the French scientist who during COVID patches. He is one of the, like, he has, let's just say he's got a lot of citations. Like, he discovered things, like Paul Newhouse discovered fundamental things about the way the human body works, and then says anything tangentially not just awful about nicotine, and suddenly he's a shill. Sure. He's a big tobacco shill, and we can't listen to and this is literally a book. We all say playbook a lot, but it's literally been written down by the likes of people like Stanton Glantz saying, hey, activists that he'd written in the 1980s. This is in the cigarette documents that you can find at
I know them.
Yeah, so you're like, there's these manuals for activists, and this is one of the parts of it where it's like, when at these hearings or when you run into these people who are almost definitely shills for tobacco and they send these scientists out, here's how you counter it and create doubt, and here's how you discredit them and silence them and all that. It's just like, it's a very, when you realize that this is the same strategy that has been employed over and over and over again, and frankly, I don't even know if they know this, but what the strategies that they are stealing or lifting from even earlier campaigns in the 1800s and early 1900s prohibitionists, and who I don't think they would love to be associated with at this point, because some of those people were insanely racist. Like people who were trying to ban opium because they just mostly hated Chinese immigrants. You're using the exact same tactics pretty much that were used.
They don't realize it wasn't actually their playbook to begin with. I mean, they're basically following many people, deplorable people, really. But is it Stanton Glantz's need to stick it to big tobacco is so much greater than his desire to see people quit smoking. I mean, I think he's slowly but surely proving himself. He's outlived his heroism, and he is now officially the villain. But I agree with what you're saying, and it is I do think that what the tobacco control establishment, whether it be Bloomberg or Glantz, Dr. Kelly Henning, I think she's quoted in Big Vape as having said, Bloomberg Philanthropies is entirely about protecting kids. Whether or not something benefits adults who smoke, that is not our focus. That's not the focus of our group. And that pretty much says it all right there.
That's the same argument people made about like clean needles or like condoms during the AIDS crisis. So like, well, we don't want to encourage kids to have sex, or we don't want to encourage kids or say in any way drug use is acceptable. So let's just let everybody else die. I mean, that's insane logic. That I think, frankly, I would hope at this point, at least in America, over the last however many months, people are sick to death about the children being used as a political just battering ram for whatever random issue somebody wants to bring to the forefront. I think there's a whole big old like half of this country that seems to be continuing to pretend it's not just like it's so transparent. Or you're like the kids. You're like, well, we're not even banning things for kids anymore. We're banning things for adults now. That's one of the things I testified in Maryland about. Was like, if it's about the kids, why are we talking about banning things for adults? Why aren't we talking about putting these products in adult-only stores like we do with literally every other adult-only product? If we put it in a separate store anyway to begin with.
Yeah, let me ask you. I want you to grade advocacy in this community, and what I know, and what do you think we're doing wrong, and what could we do better?
Oh, I don't even know if it's my place, but from what I have seen in the advocacy, like amazing. It is the it's an overused phrase, but it is a David versus Goliath story, and man, these Davids know how to crunch numbers. And they know how to show up to testify, and they know how to annoy the crap out of their lawmakers, and they know how to not shut up. Which that's the passion is the best thing, and the fact that it is truly grassroots, unlike the other side, right? Whereas this side of things doesn't have the money necessarily or the top-down coordination. We have that democratic approach where everybody in every state is watching their lawmakers and what's coming up, and finding a way to communicate it when it's necessary. We don't always hit the ball out of the court. Like, I fully admit during the PACT Act stuff with the ban on mailing vapor products, I completely missed that. I missed how important that was going to be, the way the story was being told, the way I was hearing it. I was like, well, it doesn't sound that important. And then when it happened and I actually looked at it, I was like, completely, we could have done a better job coordinating on it. I didn't realize what an impact that was going to have on the entire industry. But overall, given it's a miracle. Like, I said the fight's kind of over in the US, but it is a miracle that the vapor industry and the technology and the science is where it is now, that it wasn't just wiped off the face of the earth when the FDA tried to ban importation of these products back in 2007, 2008, however long.
2007, yeah.
That would have been the end. The cat would have stayed in the bag. And honestly, millions of people would have died probably 20 years from now, maybe 30 years from now. And so that's all thanks to the community, the people who were on those message boards in the beginning, trying to figure out coils and ohms and stuff like that. I wouldn't be doing advocacy if there wasn't already advocacy in this space happening, because I wouldn't have been hearing these facts and these stories, and the same people that we listen to now, like Mariwa and Colin Mendelsohn and Clive, if they weren't already telling this story and raising the alarm, I wouldn't be involved. I'd probably just be with like everyone else and be like, well, they're just bad. That's why we're bad. So whatever.
Well, we got like 10 minutes, so I'm going to hit you with some of our fun questions that we used to ask here at the end of the show. If you had an hour alone in the White House, what would you do? All by yourself, 1 hour in the White House.
What follow-up question? Do I have any liability or criminal?
No liability.
No. Open season.
Man. Oh, there's a lot. Well, it's all probably super boring. I'd probably try and find JFK's like cocaine room.
Yeah. At least you stayed out of the Lincoln room. Everybody goes right to the Lincoln room when that's that question.
That's a good answer.
I love that answer. I love that answer.
It's historical.
Still some more
stairwell that goes down to like, just this palace with like, golden mirrors with just, I don't know, huge heaps of Bolivian marching powder on it. Anyway,
it would just be a wall with people with a saying that everybody writes in the bathroom. Todd was here and the date.
I imagine there's got to be a big chunk of the moon somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Ooh.
What was your favorite toy growing up?
Favorite toy? Oh man, I was a reader growing up. I didn't play with so much toy, but you know what I did actually really like? Ooh, this is gonna date me, but it was old when I had a pogo stick. I really liked
hell yeah.
When I was a kid, I really liked just flinging my body around space without any concern for when I landed.
Yeah. Oh, let me get you here. What is the one band or musician you would love to party with?
Oh man.
Dead or alive? Dead or alive?
Dead or alive?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's such a tough question. There'd be so many fun people. Tom Waits. We'd get into some shenanigans for sure. I feel like there would be woods involved and maybe like a creepy lady by a red barn. Tom Waits. It wouldn't be like any other rock star. He wouldn't take me to bars or like concerts. He would end up be like, let's get in the car. And we would
be like an
hour drive.
It'd be like a David Lynch film, only with like tons of like drugs and stuff. Oh, well, actually, that's still a David Lynch film.
Oh, I should have said Blondie now. I'm like, Blondie would be fun too. But actually, I think I'm sticking with Tom Waits. He'd be real fun.
If you were arrested with no explanation, what would your friends and family assume you've done?
Vaping on a plane.
Vaping on a plane.
I just forget. Sometimes when I have it on me, especially if I'm traveling, I don't want it to like fall into a weird spot, so I usually have it in a pocket. And I'll sometimes reach back there and completely forget that I'm in a place where I'm not supposed to be doing that. And I'll just be like, oh no, if you do the inhale, and I'm just like, God damn, I just gotta like hold it in here as long as the vapor takes to kind of like disperse.
I'm with you on that one. I think that the recently the better pod systems, they just always forget there's that really bright light on the inhale, on the puff, and it just gives you away on your flight. And it's
I don't even do it anymore, because at this point I'm like, that would be so embarrassing. It would be a news story, like it would be, and I just can't anymore. But like back in the day, earlier in the day, where I was like, it's like an 8-hour flight, I'm gonna give a little.
I can either confirm.
I was just going to do that. We all do that.
and vape the whole way back. No,
We
I
all
cannot.
do that blowing in our shirt shit like it's gonna work.
No, you just hold it in forever until you're blue in the face, and then you exhale, and it's just carbon
As far as I'm
dioxide.
concerned, like it's defined by breathing it out. So like if I breathe, like because I think it was Mark Sliss maybe who taught, maybe it was Wojtek who taught me the hold it in trick, where he was just like, yeah, just hold it in for a while, and because I don't, I use when I do it, I use a blue, which is not a whole lot of vapor. It's just not a big cloud.
Yeah.
Holds it in, it's nothing. I'm like, you know what? If no one smells it, no one sees it. But no, I just not on a plane. I hope that's not what they would think. Maybe they would think I did something. I think my friends and family think of me as more heroic than I probably am. So like, oh, she was probably trying to do something very heroic. It's gonna be dumb. It's like I tripped and just like something illegal fell out of my purse in front of a cop.
One of the questions one of our questions, our other co-host that is not here tonight, Allison. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oh, that's so good. Widen your circle as much as you can. This is advice that I've sort of, this is like advice that I kind of apply to all parts of life, especially in my work. Honestly, it's one of the reasons I've taken a little, having Guy and other people in my work now to kind of like not carry the load, but to kind of keep the eye on the ball so that I can research and kind of engage with different communities, like the drugs harm reduction community, kind of widen this out and see all of our issues as interrelated. And but I do that in all parts of my life and including knowledge, widen the circle. Like when you find yourself, because I think we all do this when we're fixated on an issue because we're passionate about it. There's usually a certain point in time for me where I'm like, okay, it's now time for me to start widening this out and kind of look at something that seems maybe unrelated, but just different, something I can use and kind of explore that for a while too. And then I invariably find connections with all of that stuff. But yeah, I think that's probably the best. Other than that, my mom's advice, which wasn't really advice, it was permission to get in trouble kind of, where she would just say, it never hurts to ask. Like
never hurts to ask.
Never, which is not true, but I use it and I can't stop. So
yeah, I got the same one, but in Italian. She would say it in Italian.
You should hear it in Yiddish. It's beautiful. Not really.
Let's see here. If you could have a lifetime supply of anything, what would it be?
Oh, there's so many things. Gee, I don't know.
That's a tough one. I had to really think about that
Good
one, man.
question,
I'm gonna say sushi, but I'm like, how would they send it and where would I keep it? That would be send me a package every day. That's a lot.
You really can't eat that every day, though. It's not good for
preserving that which you have a lifelong supply. Do you have to have it all at once?
I would develop an allergy for sure. Like 5 weeks into it. Oh yeah, no beer. It would probably be beer.
Beer, yeah.
Something very staple and boring, like beer or grapes.
But if you get sick of it, you know that there's always the demand out there, right?
Absolutely, I'll just turn that right around.
It's nice when you open that refrigerator and you don't have to do this, like looking for it, and it's just right there.
I haven't been drinking as much lately because I used to be a solid beer drinker. Like my husband used to boast about it, where we were at some event and there was a drinking competition. Randomly, they're like, come chug beer with me. And my husband's like, you should 100% do this, you will win. And I was like, no. But during the pandemic, I think we all kind of over imbibed, and there was a certain point where I was like, okay, I need to kind of just relax. And over the last year, I just found just not drinking as much. I do miss beer, and I miss having it in the fridge when I want it.
Yeah. Have you dabbled in the ciders?
I'm not a sweet fan. I'm not a big fan of sweet stuff. So, but there are, some of the ciders that I've had more recently. This in the early days, it was just Angry Orchard, which is very sweet, and now you're getting some of the dry ciders. Those I enjoy.
Yeah, same here.
I like not a light beer in terms of like color or style, but like I like a session beer. I like a session ale. So like and ciders are frankly pretty heavy, just with all the sugar.
So I guess you're probably not a Black Velvet fan, like a dry cider with Guinness, half and half.
That sounds really good, though.
I'm a fan of that. Woodchuck, Woodpecker, the American Hard Cider Company, way back when they're no longer around, I don't think, but that's when I first became aware of the Black Velvet, and it's unlike the Black and Tan, which I'm not a huge fan of. The Black Velvet's pretty good, but you have to get a decent cider and Angry Orchard.
We have a version here in Australia. We call it the snake bite. You use a pint glass. You use 2 shots of vodka, then half cider, and then a IPA. over the top of it.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Minus
I was
the
thinking
2
about
shots of
Blamire.
vodka. Whoa.
No. You need the 2 shots of vodka in there.
And then the Uber call to come pick you up.
You don't call it a snake bite for no reason. The vodka's called the vodka's called the venom. The venom.
All right, this is a tough question, and you might upset a few people here. But we asked it last week for the first time. This is a vaping show. Those questions about flavors. If you could remove one popular flavor from the list of flavors, which one would it be? This is the one you hate.
Grape.
Grape, yes. Grape.
I'm sorry. Yes,
can
I'm
get behind
sorry
that.
to all of my friends and family who like purple drink, but synthetic grape for me is one of the most offensive flavors on the planet. It just tastes like purple sugar. It just mostly tastes like sugar to me. I don't know. There's something about it I can't. And as a flavor for vapes, although I did once very early on with the V2, I had a green tea flavored one that just came in like a random pack, and boy, was that not great. That was
I think grape and cherry are just really hard to do. They always end up taking artificial sort of, the flavors are just never
they probably remind us of medicine, at least me. The cherry, synthetic cherry flavor always reminds me of medicine as a child.
Yeah, it tastes artificial, never organic. And it's
Robitussin.
It like Robitussin.
Our mixologist down there is going to disagree with you.
Maybe I should try some of yours. I bet you make very subtle flavors that don't just taste like sugar. And because then you've got the vapor juice sometimes with the, I can't remember what that's called, but I'm like, it's for someone who hates sweets.
So what is your go-to flavor?
Tobacco. I know, boring, right? Like, I mean, I used
not at all.
I used to like the
not at all, actually.
When I smoked cigarettes, I smoked menthols. I did Black and Milds, and I used menthol American Spirits. I don't know where I picked up the Black and Mild habit from. I mostly like the way those smelled.
Damn, Michael.
I fucking I love purple sugar. I don't know what No, but the best tobacco flavors are the ones that helped me quit almost a 3-pack a day habit. That was 13 years ago. That's why I'm here. It's because these things, I was never going to quit. I was resigned to die smoking cigarettes. And I found the totally wicked Tornado Teas, put some Boba's Bounty made by Alien Visions e-liquids, and there it was. And well, actually I had to import some 36 milligram Red Label Totally Wicked 3 base, which was enough to kill most people who inhaled pipe tobacco were hacking on that one. So yes, I don't have a interest in either industry. I simply know that this works, and just say I'm still around, and I think it's really wonderful that all of us are still around. Anyhow, tobacco flavors are still good, and Watson's pretty good too.
Mine was default, so I was using flavors, and then all the flavor band stuff started happening. It became harder to get, and I'd already done like the device switching. I wasn't doing it again. I liked the little device. It was fine. So I was like, you know what? They have one tobacco version that's kind of different from the other tobacco version. I was like, it's palatable and fine. I'm just not messing around with flavors anymore because it's too much time. This is what worries me the most about the cat's out of the bag. People have access. People are smart. They can build things. But I mostly worry about the older smokers, the rural smokers, like the urban black older smokers who don't want to futz around with new technologies, and they don't want to have to drive around and figure out who is carrying the thing they need if they can't get it delivered, because it's hard to get things delivered now. So I worry about them. They're never going to quit. They might not even know these products exist.
That's the generation that in the beginning that I had such a very difficult time transitioning, because they looked at this thing like, are you kidding me, John? I'm not going to do this. And that's what was the great part with Juul. It was a closed, clean system. It didn't leak. It worked all the time. It was accessible everywhere. No matter where you went, there was a Juul sign up at some store, and they knew they could get it at 7-Eleven, AM, PM. I'm naming stores, but it was available. We are out of time, and I want to thank you, Michelle, for joining us. It was awesome to get to know you. I'm glad you answered some of those questions for us, and we got you to sing. We got Michelle to sing, baby.
I rap badly.
No, it was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. It was.
I gotta go listen to that whole song now.
if I would have remembered the words, I would have sung along with you. But I was just like, we were singing. I was like, okay, I remember that part. And then I was like, nope, that's not what she said. And then you were. Yeah, that was one of those songs. Yeah, that's one of the songs that the guys would kind of listen to, but roll the windows up and turn it down a little bit so nobody else was hearing it.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
It's just like me. I got caught at the light. Look, I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, but Shake It Off for some reason. That song, I hear it, I turn it up. I don't care. I don't care.
I love it. My favorite in traffic story. We were stuck in traffic in DC in the rain, and we rolled up to a cab in traffic, and he was jamming on maracas. He had maracas. And I nudged the person next to me, and I was like, "You've got to see what's happening over here." And it was just the funniest thing I'd ever seen stuck in traffic. Like, I was having a blast.
Yeah,
Maracas. God bless this person.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and let Phillip say his goodbyes to you. And again, thank you for.
I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying it's been a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you so much for coming on. It's I've long time admirer, and yes, Annihilation was the right answer. But more than anything, I am grateful that you've been taking time off to let yourself to even out a bit, because I know what you did, what you've been doing over the years. I think I read your first piece in 2017, and it put me on the floor. I thought it was spectacular. And ever since, I've been keeping up with your work, and you've done it with a great deal of, let's say, your dedication to getting it all right. And your pieces might be a little long, but I'll be damned if they aren't well researched. And I'm very grateful. And most of all, I hope you will continue, but also take rest where necessary. I guess Australia has just checked out.
Oh no, you lost the connection. Bummer.
Yeah. And I tend to get long-winded. Paul, I decided to get the hell out of here before I put him to sleep. But I'm grateful that you came on, and it's been a pleasure. I look forward to talking again.
Guys. Next time I'll make sure I have a beer. It feels appropriate. This is lovely.
Yeah. And you have anything coming up that you want to share with our viewers?
Nope, just gonna keep enjoying summer, doing work. I mean, there's gonna be big things coming, I'm sure. It's just at this point, nothing that I want to tell people about yet.
Yeah, perfect. And we would love to have you back anytime you want to come back on. Hit Phillip or myself. I have to get certified to DM you on Twitter, so I'll have to do that. I have to work on it.
Really?
That's what it says.
Changed function.
Yeah, it wouldn't let me DM you. It said I had to be certified.
Really?
What?
Yeah, I follow you, but when I tried to send you a message, it said you have to send this person a message. You must be certified.
Well, Phil has my email. He could just send it to you.
Yeah. I'll have him send it. I want to thank everybody.
She can call me Phil. Okay, I'm okay with that. I can be Phil. But I look forward to seeing you, at least you represented in the Netflix series, and thank you for everything you've done.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Keep singing.
Keep singing. Sing. Maybe do a piece on the music industry next. No, I'm kidding.
About dirty.
Yeah, there you go. I want to thank everybody in chat. We'll see everybody next Wednesday. Not sure who our guest is, and hopefully the rest of our staff will be back next week. But thank you again, Phillip, and thank you again, Michelle, for being on the show. Thank you, Nick, and also our Ozzy who lost his connection. We'll see everybody next week.